to accelerate. With the experience gained over the years and the feedback received from hundreds of individuals through the training that we provided previously, this course content is diligently planned to accelerate your learning. So let us take a quick look at what is that we are covering as part of this part 1 of the 3-part series of the financials training. We will start with a quick understanding of demo data and Contoso companies. Demo data is something that is provided by Microsoft for training and demo purposes, and Contoso is a fictitious company that is part of this demo data. It is important that you have an idea of these two things, so that is where we are starting our journey. Then I will get you familiar with the navigation, opening the forms, navigating to the different action panes, action buttons, and everything. Then we will take a look at how you create the vendors. This is just to give you a feel of how you start creating the records in finance and operations application and get you started with fundamentals. Then we will take a look at how you get access to finance and operations environment, because you will have to practice everything that you learn. Practice is utmost important. Understand the procure to pay process and some important terminology around the procure to pay process. And this is not specific to finance consultants. So no matter whether you're a finance consultant or a supply chain consultant or even a technical consultant, you have to have a basic understanding on the procure to pay cycle. And that is the reason we're getting started with this basic procure to pay cycle, so that you understand how a process will flow and how you do that process in the application. Then we will jump into the finance core topics, where we start with creating the vendor invoice journals. So there could be a possibility of we receiving some invoices without having the purchase orders to it. So why that situation would occur is something that you will learn as you go through that particular video. Then we will take a look at the creation of legal entities. So what is a legal entity and how do you create them? That is what you will learn. Then moving on, I will show you how do you create the fiscal calendars. What is a fiscal calendar and how do you create the calendar and the calendar periods? Then the critical one, the heart of the finance application, the ledger form. So you will understand what is this ledger form and what are the basic and fundamental configurations that you will have to do to move forward with other areas of the configuration. Next, you'll understand what is accounting currency and reporting currency and how do you configure that. So what are the things that you have to keep in mind when you are configuring these accounting currency and reporting currency in the ledger form. Then I will take you to general journal creation, and you will understand the different ways to enter the transactions. So any transactions that need to be entered in the ERP application, finance and operations applications, you will have to use the journals as one of your ways. So you will see how do you do that. Then we get into the core configuration, like how do you create the chart of accounts? How do you create the main accounts? What is the difference between the chart of accounts and main accounts? Somebody who is looking at it from outside of the system, they both look like one and same, chart of accounts and main accounts. There is a very slight difference between both of them, and you will understand that as we go forward. Then I will take you through the currency exchange rates. If you are implementing it to a company that is using the multi-currency, and most likely you'll be implementing it to a company that is using the multi-currencies, because the investment on the finance and operation is really going to be huge. And the companies that are really multi-country and multi-currency companies will really go for these implementations. And that is where you will have to understand how do you create those currency exchange rates and how do you make them automatically imported, because the exchange rates will keep fluctuating. And that is a truth that we all definitely know. So how do you get them automatically imported? Then I will take you through the periodic journals and voucher templates. So the game is all about how do you reduce the work to the end users. That is when they start liking the application. So through periodic journals and voucher templates, you can make the reusable journals where if there is a invoice that has to be booked every month, like a rental expense or insurance expense, something like that, you will be able to use the periodic journals or voucher templates to address that requirement. Finally, we will take a look at the accrual schemes. What are these accrual schemes and how do you configure them and use them? All right, so this is what we will be covering as part of this part 1 of the 3-part series, and I would like to welcome you to the course, and let's rock it. In this video, you will get familiar with the navigation, and then I will show you how do you create vendors in D365 F&O, right? Then I will introduce you to the demo data, because it is really important for you to know what is demo data, because you quite often hear this term demo data and demo environment, right? Then I will also give you a quick introduction on Contoso business and Contoso companies. All right, without further delay, let us get into the application now. This is my homepage for D365 F&O. All right, this is looking amazing, isn't it? Of course, at least for me, it is looking amazing, right? So if you look at this one, you click on this here, then you see here, this is where you will see the modules. Okay, so all the different modules that are available within F&O, you will be able to see them here. Like if you take financials into consideration, certain modules that we will be covering in financials is accounts payable, where you will have the vendor related information and purchase order and all those details there. And you will have accounts receivable, where you have the customer's information, sales orders, and the payments that are due from the customers. So all that information will be available in this module. Okay, so like that, you have different modules like budgeting, cash and bank management, asset management, and all this, right? So we will be covering many of these modules as part of the financials training, right? So if you click on this accounts payable, you see here, you see the different forms that you have within accounts payable. Okay, so I have my all vendors. So these are my suppliers. Usually you hear people calling them as either suppliers or vendors to represent the same thing, right? So you have your all vendors within the organization, and you have your all purchase orders, where the different purchase orders information that we placed orders to our suppliers. So all these details, right? So if you look at this one here, when I focus on this all vendors, I see this star mark here. So this is saying add to favorites, right? So if I have a form which I will be opening commonly, right? So every day I open it like at least 5 times, right? Then what I can do is I mark this as favorite, and all the forms that you mark as favorite, you will see them under this favorite. Okay, so I'll just show you this favorites here, and you have nothing, right? So I go back to this vendors and then mark it. So this is available here, right? So at the same time, this is the recent where all the forms that I have accessed recently. So all that information will be available here, right? So I have my all vendors because that is something that I have accessed just some time before. Okay. And if you look at this one here, the different forms are grouped under different sections here. Okay, so all the vendors and vendor related information is available under this particular section, and the purchase orders related section is this one, and then you have this setup. Okay, so the configuration related forms are usually be available under setup. Okay, so if you're looking for something that is sort of configuration, then you will have to come to setup and look for that particular form. Okay, and similarly, you have this inquiries and reports. So if you are looking for something that is more a sort of an inquiry or a report, then you'll have to search for that under here, right? Well, so I go to this accounts payable, then I will open this all vendors form, okay? Because I just want to give you a feel of how the vendors form look like, right? So this is my vendors form. All right. So for example, I want to go to all purchase orders, right? Where I want to see the purchase orders information available in the system. So I click on this accounts payable module, and I have this all purchase orders, right? So sometimes, you have too many forms within the application, right? Because this is a real huge application. Then it is difficult for you to remember where exactly that form is available, right? Then what you can do is you can use this search page here. I'm sure that you will be using it heavily as you're learning this, right? So search for this form here, all purchase orders. Right. So when you search for this, system will show you the relevant search results here. Okay, and it shows you like the most relevant is this one, accounts payable and purchase orders. So you can take this one, correct? So that makes your life really easier, right? And the good thing is that sometimes I don't want to even type everything, so I just type this. You see the first keyword, sorry, first letter in the word. Then systems can still tell me like, okay, are you looking for all purchase orders? Yes. Okay, then take it. Right. So this is how you navigate to different forms, right? So now let me go back to all vendors. So I am in all vendors form now. So if you look at this one here, you have list of vendors that are available in this particular application, right? You see here, this is the vendor account 1001 and Acme Office Supplies, right? So like that, I want to create my new vendor. So how do I create it? So on top of the form, you see the different buttons here, right? So you have the button to create it, delete it, and you have the save button as well, right? So along with these buttons, you also have many more buttons which are intended for different operations, right? So for example, for a particular vendor, you want to capture the bank account information, then you go to this bank accounts and capture the information. Or else if you want to record the contacts information, for example, when you are dealing with a particular supplier, then you will have a lot of contacts that you would like to maintain or manage associated to that particular vendor, right? Then you can click on these contacts and capture that. Right, so different buttons that you have here perform different operations, right? So you do have tabs here. So sometimes the information that you are looking for, if it is not available here, perhaps that might be available in a different tab. Okay, so you call this as a tab, right? Invoice tab, general tab, all this, right? So let us quickly create a new vendor, right? Because I just want you to get comfortable with navigation, correct? So let me create a new vendor here. I create new vendor by clicking on this button, and you see here, system automatically gave me a number here, vendor account. Okay, so based on the configuration that you have, you can have this automatically generated for you, or else you can even have some manual coding. But majority of the implementations, they will have this automatically generated. Okay. So the new vendor that is created, and I'm gonna take here XYZ Enterprises. Right. So the good thing is that when you are entering a particular vendor name, system can also look for you. It will look into the database and it will tell you if there are any matches. Okay. For example, I try to search for a different one now. For example, you see, I'm trying to enter a vendor who is already available in the system, right? Because my colleague already created a new vendor for this particular Acme Office Supplies. So I didn't know this. I'm starting to create that, but now system telling me that there is already somebody available here. Do you want to select him? Right? Then I know that, okay, no, I don't really want to create a new vendor now. Okay, so then I'll quit the process, right? I even delete this record that I am creating, right? So this is one of the problems that many customers will talk about, that many people are coming in and they're creating their own vendors, right? So the same vendor is being duplicated in the system, right? So that is how system can help us to avoid the duplicates, right? Now let us go ahead with our XYZ Enterprises. Okay, so I entered XYZ Enterprises and the system is not really pushing anything here, right? And I try to save this record. So if I try to save this record, system is actually not allowing me to do it. So what is it telling me? It is telling us that the field group must be filled in. So if in case you did not provide the information in certain fields where the information is really mandatory, then system will not allow you to move forward, right? That is what anybody would like. So you see here, it is also highlighting me that this is the mandatory field and you have not entered. right? So let me select a group here. So I click on this drop down and I choose this vendor usually supplies me some services. Okay, so that is the reason I'm tagging him to the services vendors. Okay, and I save it. So this one is now saved. Okay, and there is plenty of information that you can actually capture pertaining to your vendor that you are creating, right? So you can set some information here like how many employees are really working in this organization, right? And if you have any organization registration number, you can take that and key in here. Right, I'm not covering each and every field here because it becomes too much at the beginning, right? So I will be showing you some important information that you can capture so that you understand how can you use it for your implementations, right? You can add the address information here, right? So by the way, these are called fast tabs, right, or expandable tabs. By the way, these are called fast tabs, right, or expandable tabs. That is available, right? And then you will be able to our expandable tabs, right? So you can expand this tab, fast tabs, right, or expandable tabs, right? So you can expand this tab and then you will be able to see the information that is available, right? So we did not create any address for this vendor, right? So I go ahead and add this. So you have the ability to create more than one address, right? So for example, I have one address which is for head office. So I can give it a name so that people can easily identify that this is a head office address, right? And you have this purpose field, okay? So you click on this lookup and you will be able to choose what is the purpose of this address. Okay, so sometimes what happens is you will have the business address and you'll have the delivery address and you'll have some remittance address for the vendors and even the customers when you're creating the customers. So you might want to specify something as a delivery address and something as a business address. So you might want to specify something as a delivery address and something as a business address. As business for now, then so you select the purpose, right? So that is how you can use the delivery address and something as a business address, right? So that is how you can use this purpose. So you select the purpose as business for now, then so what is the country or region and zip code? So let us select something here and so put some street information and enter the city, state, and county, right? So based on the zip code that we have selected, the other information is defaulted here, right? So you will understand them in a little more detail in later videos, right? And the address that you create, at least there should be one address which should be marked as primary, right? So because that becomes the primary address of the vendor. So you can mark that as primary and leave it here, right? So similarly, you will be able to create another address, right? So how many ever the addresses that the business is needing, then you will be able to create all of them here, right? Then enter the contact information of the vendor, for example, the email and phone, website, Twitter, LinkedIn account, everything, right? So all of this can be entered here. Then, so when you're registering a vendor, so initially they must be giving us a certain credit limit, right? For example, some $10,000 or $1 million as a credit limit, right? You can enter the credit limit here. So what happens is that there are certain functionalities where when we are creating a purchase order to a supplier, for whom the credit limit is already exceeding, right? So in such cases, system can automatically stop the purchase order creation, right? That again depends on some configuration that you will understand later, right? But I'm just giving you an understanding like how different fields will be used in the implementations, right? So you can enter the credit limit that is applicable for this particular vendor, and then if you scroll it, I'm focusing on the major fields that will be used in majority of the implementations and not everything, right? So what is the currency that we normally transact with this guy? So you can choose the currencies out of this list, right? So I'm leaving it to US dollars for now. Scroll it down, and the major information that you will be entering is this one, right? So if we are getting into a relationship with one vendor, then we agree for a particular terms of payment, right? For example, the invoice that is sent by the supplier, we agree that we pay it within 30 days, right? That becomes your terms of payment, okay? You will understand how you configure the terms of payment in the later sections, okay? But for now, yes, so that is how the terms of payment will be useful for you. sections. Okay, but for now, yes. So that is how the terms of payment will be useful for you. With that, we covered terms of payment with later sections. Okay, but for now, yes. So that is how the terms of payment will be useful for you. With that, we covered good enough information about vendor creation, and we looked at many fields that you might use during your implementation, right? So next, I want to give you an understanding on what happens during the implementation, right? Because we looked at the vendor creation process and we talked about different fields and why did we know all of them right now, right? So during the implementation, the first thing you do as consultants is you will conduct the requirement gathering workshops. Functionality of a particular. So with your client, you conduct the requirement gathering workshops, right? So with your client, you will sit with them and you will demonstrate the functionality of a particular process, like the vendor creation process as an example. So you will show them like, this is how you will create the vendors in D365, right? Then while you're showing that, then people will keep asking the questions, right? So somebody will ask you like, can we capture multiple addresses? Then you will say, yes, we can capture multiple addresses and this is how you do it. And somebody will ask you like, can I capture even the contact information? Then you show them like, this is how you do it, right? So like that, you will demonstrate the application to them and at the same time, you will also capture the requirements. Okay, so you should be knowing these different fields and how do you do it. So you should be in a position to answer them like, how can they do something in D365 finance and operations, right? So they must be using a different application, different ERP application or a traditional application or whatsoever, right? So this is how you demonstrate it and then you capture the requirements from them. All right, now let us do a quick recap of what we learned in this video. So you comfortably can now navigate to the modules and forms after watching this video. Then you know how to search for a particular form that you're looking for. So instead of going to the particular module and then checking for the form, you know, like you can easily search it using the search pane, right? Then you know how to navigate through the tabs and you know what are fast tabs or expandable tabs and how do you navigate through different buttons and all this, right? Then you also know how do you create the new records in D365 because whichever the form that you get into, the process is going to be the same. So you will click on the new button and you will go ahead with your record creation. At the same time, you learned how do you create the new vendor and how can you add relevant information that is required for the vendor, right? So with this, we are done with this video and thank you so much for watching. Hello everyone. In this video, you will get familiar with demo data and Contoso companies. Then you will understand how the data is maintained in finance and operations. Then finally, you will understand what are legal entities. Okay, so which ones you normally call them as legal entities. Let us get into the application now. Right. So in the previous video, we looked at vendors form, right? So I'm going back to the accounts payable and opening up this all vendors, right? So you see here, you have a lot of vendors, right? Including the one that we created, correct? Then the question is, who created all this? And they provided this data for trainings and provided this data. That is actually Microsoft who provided this data. And they provided this data for trainings and demos purpose, right? Because it becomes quite tedious process to create all this data for anyone who want to provide some training or do some demos to the customer, right? And in fact, we consultants look into the demo data for a lot of reasons, like looking at a particular configuration or checking on a certain functionality and all this, right? So that is the reason you will be quite often using the demo data. So you will be looking into the demo environment. So you normally hear people calling this as demo environment, right? So whichever the project that you will be working in future, certainly you will be having access to the demo environment, right? So in your project or at least in the company to which you work for, they will have a demo environment, right? So you will be able to practice certain things and then you will actually implement that in the live environment or else in the customer. You will actually implement that in the live environment or else in the customer environment, okay? So in this demo data, the main thing that you will have to know is these legal entities. Okay, so in the previous video, I did not tell you what is this, right? So this is actually a legal entity dropdown where you can see the list of companies, list of legal entities that are available in this demo data. Okay, so this demo data is configured with a fictitious company in mind. So that fictitious company is nothing but Contoso Entertainment Systems, right? So you're seeing this Contoso Entertainment System here, right? So Contoso Entertainment Systems is a fictitious company by Microsoft that is used only for demo purposes, and that company does not really exist in the real world. Okay, so let me just show you something here. So Contoso is a group of companies. So it is not a single legal entity. So it is spread across multiple parts of the globe, right? So you have Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, and you have Contoso Entertainment Systems India, and you have one subsidiary in Malaysia. Entertainment Systems India, and you have one subsidiary in Malaysia retail, and you in Japan, and you have one subsidiary in Malaysia, one in Japan, and another one is like Contoso Retail in USA. So this is a retail entity within USA, right? So similarly, you do have another one in Russia, right? So what will you call all of these? In general terms, of course, you will call them as companies, right? So these all are companies established in different countries, correct? And you can also call them as legal entities. So that is a perhaps Dynamics 365 specific term, or else maybe this must be used in some other ERPs as well. A legally established entity. Maybe this must be used in some other ERPs as well, that I'm not quite sure, but yeah. So legal entity is basically a legally established entity. Okay, so all of these companies, you can call them as legal entities, right? So if you take a look at this one here, within United States, I have two legal entities because the business needs to be separated. So the earnings, profits, and everything is different for Contoso Retail and Contoso Entertainment Systems USA. And that is the reason Contoso has two businesses, two legal entities in the United States. So they are legally registered as two different companies, but they can be maintained within a single D365 Finance and Operations application. Now, let me take you back to the application so that we see how multiple legal entities can be maintained within single finance and operations application instance, right? So I am back to my finance and operations. And as I was showing you earlier, this is the legal entity dropdown, right? So you always hear people calling that as companies dropdown as well. So if somebody wants to tell you that go to Contoso Entertainment Systems India, they can tell you like, take the company INMF, right? So then what you do is go to this lookup and look for that company here, right? So I can also type that here, right? So I can also type that here, INMF, right? Contoso Entertainment Systems India. For system reasons, each legal entity will be given a 4-letter code, and that is the reason your Contoso Entertainment Systems India also has been given a 4-letter code here, that is INMF, right? So anytime that you want to refer to Contoso Entertainment Systems India, you can just tell the people that go to this particular legal entity with code INMF, right? Or else you can tell them go to company INMF, right? So this is the common usage that you will hear from the people, right? Now, how can we use a single application to still perform our operations for different legal entities, right? So that is something that we'll take a look at now. So we are with the INMF company here, right? And you're seeing all the vendors that are available. Now what I will do is I am duplicating this tab, so that way I'm just still being in the same vendors form, and let me change this legal entity here. So this is Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, that is USMF company, right? So throughout our training, we will be focusing only USMF legal entity, right? Okay, so I went into the USMF company now, and you can see here, this is my list of vendors, right? So do you see the difference here? When I log into the USMF company, I see the data that is related to USMF company, right? Because you are seeing a vendor, Acme Office Supplies here, right? However, if you take a look at my Indian legal entity, you're not seeing that vendor at all, correct? So the point to be noted here is the data in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations application is maintained per each legal entity, right? So based on the legal entity that you are selecting, you will be seeing only the data that is related to that particular company, right? So usually what happens is that users who are working for Indian subsidiary, they will be given access to only that particular legal entity, right? Now that I am being the administrator for this particular application, I am able to log into all the companies. So that way, people will see only the data that they should be seeing, okay? And on top of it, we will have the administrative control where we can control who should see what data. So what I mean by that is, so accounts payable clerk should be having access only to the vendors form, right? So they should not be seeing anything like customers or sales orders and all that, right? So that is part of the security configuration, which you will have to learn later, correct? Now, let's keep moving on now. So I mentioned that the data is maintained per each legal entity, and you literally have seen that, right? However, there are certain forms where the data is shared, okay? So I can say like 90% of the data, that is, when I say 90% of the data, I say 90% of the forms, the data is maintained per company. While there are some 10% forms, I'm just giving you a rough number here, right? So there is like 10% forms where the data is shared across the companies. So what exactly that means? So you are seeing here, the data is different, right? In this form and this form. Now I will take you to a particular form. So that form is available under System Administration. So if I go to the System Administration, I have this users. So you see, these are the list of users that are available within the Finance and Operations application in this particular instance, right? So even if I go to the same form in the USMF company, like I go to the, okay, let me search for that instead. So I am searching for users. I click on this and you see here. So are you seeing the same users or are you seeing different users? Of course, you are seeing the same users, right? You see here, that is starting with this COBA, and that is same here. And you see my account here, admin account, right? So the users is shared. So that is actually a shared form. So no matter in which company that you are opening that particular form, so you are going to see all the data. So you're going to see the same data because this particular form, the data is not maintained per company. So the data is shared. So why is it this way? Just think about it. So in this particular form, the users form, so you will use this form to grant access to a particular user. Just think about a case where there is a new employee who joined the organization and he should be given access to this particular application, right? So then what happens? You will have to create a new user. I mean, being a consultant, you should definitely know it, but that is normally maintained by the client because as part of your implementation training, you will train them like how should they grant access to the new employees and all that, okay? So what happens is that when you need to grant access, or when you need to manage the user permissions and privileges, being the administrator, you should have the single view of users across all the companies, okay? And that is the reason this form is shared, okay? Like this, throughout the application, there are some places where Microsoft thought that it makes more sense to share the data rather than keeping the data per company, right? So sometimes that is a business reason and sometimes that could be the system reasons, right? So quite often that is based on the business reason, okay? So it makes more sense that we share the data rather than keeping the data per company. So on that basis, Microsoft made certain forms as shared forms while certain forms as company specific forms, okay? A quick understanding on what is the business of this Contoso company, right? We talked about Contoso being the fictitious company, and they are in the business of selling the car audio systems, TVs and videos, then some audio related equipments, and also the personal computers. So what Contoso does as a business is they purchase the raw material from different suppliers, and they assemble these raw material and manufacture these audio systems and videos and personal computers and sell it to the end customers. Okay, so that is the business of Contoso. So sometimes what can also happen is they get these items produced in the Indian subsidiary, and they purchase it from the Indian subsidiary to the US subsidiary. Okay, so that is intercompany trading relationship and all that. So that is the reason it is very important that all these sibling companies, you call them as sibling companies because they're siblings, right? So all these sibling companies must exist within the same application, within the same instance. So by doing this, it is easy for the companies to manage the intercompany trading relationships as well, right? So with this, we are done with this particular video, and let us do a quick recap. A quick recap on what is that we learned in this particular video. So you now know that the majority of the data is maintained per each legal entity in finance and operations, while some data, especially the setup or configuration data. So I will let you know like what is the setup or configuration data that is shared as we go forward. But yes, mostly the setup or configuration data is shared across the companies. And obviously, you understood what are the legal entities, right? So legal entities are nothing but the companies, correct? So with that, we are done, and thank you so much for watching this video. We want to create a new vendor group, so this is where you will create this new vendor group, correct? And the moment that you create it, automatically that will show up in that drop down. Okay, so that is something that you should know about the view details. A lot of places you will have the view details, right? For example, you are seeing this language here, right? And you click on this lookup, and for some reason you want to add one more language to this. So right click and view details, right? And what about this one, ABC code here? So ABC code, again, this is something based on the importance that you wanted to give for this vendor, you will define if this vendor is A vendor or B vendor or a C vendor, right? So can I create more into this one? Let's take a look at it. I do a right click, and you see here, I don't see the view details here, right? So which means this is actually not a user defined list. So this is system defined list. Okay, so if in case we need one more thing to be added to this, then you will have to approach a developer to get this done. Okay, for example, during the implementation and during the requirement gathering, you show this particular field to the client, right? So somebody who is representing the client team, right? So during your requirement gathering sessions, they will tell you that we also want to have one more classification. We want to even have A, B, C, D, E because we have too many vendors, and we want to do the ABC coding even until D and E, right? Then what happens is that you will try to convince them that do you really need two more to it, and can't you really manage with only A, B, and C? Then they might tell you, no, we cannot do that. So that is the time that you will take that as a requirement, and you will tell them that this needs customization, right? So when you say it is a customization, then you will go back to the developer and get this developed for the customer. So that is about the drop downs, right? And you might ask me like, so is that the only way that you click on this drop down, or else do a right click and go to this particular view details, right? No, not really. So every master form that will be available somewhere in the application. So sometimes it is easy for you to know where exactly that is available, or else in some cases you do not know it, right? Because you're still learning it, and you might want to create a new value into this particular drop down, right? So if you do not know where exactly that form is available, and that is the time that you can use this right click and view details option, right? Otherwise, where this groups form is available. So if you go to the accounts payable, I go to accounts payable, and most commonly, all the setup forms will be available under setups, right? So that's what we talked about. So you click here, this particular setup, okay, and take a look at these ones here. And most likely you will find them there, right? Otherwise, you see here, the groups are related to the vendors, right? So that is the reason those will be available under vendors. So you can see here, vendor groups. So if you open it, that is the same form that you will be seeing, right? So you either do a right click and view details, that system will take you to the same place, or else you go to the accounts payable, vendors, and vendor groups, right? So that is how you can use that view details. So view details is something that you will be most commonly using throughout the application, correct? So with that, we are done with this particular video, and see you in the next one. Thank you. Hey there, please do not skip watching this video. I have a small request for you. You might see a pop-up coming from Udemy asking for your rating and review. At times, it could be quite early in the stage of the course where it would ask you for the rating. If that is the case, I would request you to ignore that pop-up for some time because we have no control about the timing of that pop-up. So, if in case you completed watching a little bit of content, then I would request you to please provide your positive feedback or constructive feedback and your rating as well. This is very critical to make this course better for everyone. All right, thank you so much, and I look forward to your rating and review. See you there in the next video. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I will introduce you to the procure to pay cycle. Then we understand what are PO invoices and non-PO invoices and why the organizations will be doing some non-PO invoices. So PO here refers to purchase order, right? And then I will introduce you to the purchase orders form, and I will also introduce you to the journals form within finance and operations application, right? Fine. So let us see now the procure to pay cycle. Right. Typically in the organizations, the procurement cycle starts with the purchase requisition. So purchase requisition, you can consider this as a purchase request where the different department users will prepare a request of the material that need to be purchased and they will submit that particular request. Okay, so based on the organization's policies, that will go for the respective people for approval, and once that is approved, that is when it goes to the procurement team, the purchase department, to be able to purchase it from one of the available suppliers or else a new supplier. Okay, so in D365 terminology, you hear people calling that as a purchase requisition. Okay, then after the purchase requisition is created and let us say submitted, and it comes to the purchase team, right? So that is where the purchase team requests for a quotation, right? So why? Just think about it. The HR team raises a request to procure some laptops, okay? And we need at least 3 laptops, right? So then what happens? When it comes to the purchase team, it is not that they just go and pick it from one of the suppliers who is available in the market, right? So it is better that we get some quotation from multiple suppliers, right? So let us see what is the price that is available at different vendors. Then we buy it from the person who is giving at a lesser price, right? So that is where even in the businesses, they will do the request for a quotation. Okay, so they request a quotation from multiple vendors available, and out of them, they will finalize one supplier. Okay, so with the supplier that is finalized, we create a purchase order. So here, when I say we, it is a purchasing team. So the purchasing agent or the buyer. Okay, so the buyer creates a purchase order to the particular vendor, okay, saying that we need 3 laptops and this is the price that we agreed and all that, and we confirm this purchase order to the supplier. Okay, upon receiving the purchase order confirmation, what the vendor does is he will let us know like what is the tentative date that he can deliver the goods, and that's it there. Okay, let us assume that the vendor confirmed that he will be delivering the goods in the next 7 days. Okay, on the 7th day, we're going to receive the material, right? So there will be a person at the warehouse, right? So usually there will be receiving clerks who will be receiving the material. So they receive the material from the vendor and they do the product receipt in the system. So in D365 terminology, you call that as a product receipt. So we received the product, right? In general, you will also hear people calling that as a goods receipt. Okay, so in D365 F&O, you do the product receipt to confirm that we received the material. Okay, and then after this product receipt is acknowledged, the vendor will send the invoice, right? So we receive the invoice from the supplier. So this is where the finance team involves into the process, right? And that is the reason I highlighted these 2 in a different color so that you know that where exactly the finance related topics come into the play, right? So all of these requisition, request for quotation, purchase order creation, and product receipt. So all of these are mainly the T&L topics. So again, you hear people calling that as T&L, right? So that is trade and logistics. At the same time, you also hear people calling that as supply chain management process. Okay, so all these processes here in blue color, those are supply chain management related processes, and invoice from the supplier and the payment to the supplier. So these are the ones related to the finance. Okay, so we receive the invoice from the supplier and that is updated in the system. So the invoice is updated saying that we got bill. Invoice is again nothing but a bill that we received from the supplier. Okay, so saying that we will have to pay him some $10,000 for the computers that we purchased, right? So we record that invoice in the system, right? And after that, so there will be a certain terms of payment where we will have to pay the invoice within 30 days. That is the agreement between us as a company and the supplier. Okay, so within that 30 days, you will do the payment to the supplier. Okay, so this is the procure to pay cycle, right? So do you think all of these steps are mandatory? Just think about the real business here, right? we talked about Contoso business. Contoso basically purchases the raw material and produces the audio and video related speakers and all that, right? TV speakers and car audio speakers and all that. So, which means we already have the established suppliers, right? So it may not be possible that every time I go and request for a quotation from multiple suppliers, right? I might not do it every time. So we as a company, we might not do it every time because we have some existing agreements with certain vendors, and we straightforward go and create a purchase order with those vendors. So that is the reason sometimes the purchase process gets started directly with the purchase order creation, right? Because we know from whom we want to purchase the material, right? At the same time, there could be some cases where you will purchase certain services mainly without a purchase order. So just think about it. Especially in the organization, you can classify the purchases in two things. One is you purchase the products or you purchase services. Okay, so purchasing the products are something like purchasing the raw material and all that, right? And services, for example, we need the travel ticket to be booked by somebody, right? So we approach a travel agent and they give us the travel ticket and all this information gets exchanged in the email, and finally we get the travel tickets and we pay the vendor, right? So in that case, what happens is that we may not create a purchase order and do the product receipt and all that because literally we are not receiving any material there, right? So in such cases, what happens is you will directly receive the invoice, right? Still, you're liable to pay that invoice. So this is something that you will call as non-PO invoice, non-purchase order invoice, because you do not have a purchase order, correct? So like this, in the organization, sometimes the invoices will be related to the purchase order, and sometimes those invoices could be not related to the purchase order, okay? So if in case the invoice is related to the purchase order, then we go to the purchase order and proceed with the invoicing, okay? And if it is not related to the purchase order, that is where we enter those transactions using something called invoice journals, okay? I will just quickly show you both of them, like how does the purchase orders form look like and how does the invoice journals form look like, right? So let me take you to the application. I am in the application now, and you click on the modules and accounts payable and all purchase orders, right? So when you open this form, you will be able to see the list of purchase orders that are available in the USMF company, right? In the demo data. So here, you can see here, this is one purchase order that we created with Acme Office Supplies, and this is with another supplier, and this is with another vendor and all this. So you have your list of purchase orders that are created. Okay, so let me just open one of them. By clicking on this, I will be able to see the details of this purchase order, right? So you have the header part of it, which talks about your vendor information and all that. We will not be covering the purchase order creation process in this video. You will be taking a look at it in the next video. Okay, so but I just want to give you a quick understanding of this one here. So when you click on this lines section, scroll it down. So this is where you add the lines that you wanted to purchase. So when I say lines, that means the products, right? So you can see here, we are purchasing the standard cabinet from the supplier, and how much is the quantity and what is the price that is agreed and all this, right? So this is the purchase order that is created, and eventually what happens is that we confirm this purchase order by going into this purchase and you will confirm the purchase order. Then you will do the product receipt when you receive the material, okay? And then this is where you will do the invoice, okay? Where once we receive the invoice from the supplier, the finance team, the accounts payable team comes into the system and they select the purchase order and do the invoice from here. Okay, so this is with reference to the purchase order related invoices. Then what about the ones that are non-purchase order related, right? So let's just take a quick look at it. So throughout the application, across all the modules, you will have something called journals, right? So if you go to this accounts payable module, you have this invoice journals, right? When you open this, so this is the journal that you will use to record the non-purchase order related invoices. Okay, I will explain you this in detail in the coming videos. Okay, but just for a quick understanding, you come here and you create a new record and you get into the lines and you enter the vendor from whom we got the invoice and what is the value of the invoice. You put the credit here and to which account that it should get debited. Okay, what is that expense? So if it is a travel related expense, you're going to choose the travel expense here and you will post this transaction. Okay, so you will understand this in detail in the next videos, where in the next video I will cover the purchase order creation process, and next to that we will look at the vendor invoice journal creation process. Okay, so just like how we have the invoice journals, we do have the payment journals. So you go to the accounts payable and you go to the payments, then here you have the vendor payment journal, right? So using this journal, you will do the payments to the vendors. Okay, so similarly, you do have the accounts receivable, and here, if in case you have to do the payment to the customer, sorry, you have to receive the payment from the customer, then you use this customer payment journal, right? So we receive the payment from the customer and we enter this journal through which we will update our records saying that we received the payment from the customer and we have nothing due from this customer, right? So like that, you use journals in finance and operations system to record your transactions. All right, So that's all for this session. So let us do a quick recap of what did we learn here. You understand the procure to pay cycle. Then we took a look at what are purchase order related invoices and what are non-PO invoices, right? Then I introduced you to the purchase orders form, and you also learned about the journals, right? So using journals, we post the transactions into the system, right? So with that, we are done for this video, and thank you so much for watching. Hello everyone. In this video, we will look at purchase order creation and invoice posting. Let me take you to the application now. I am back in the finance and operations application, and I look at the modules under which I have accounts payable, in which I can go to this all purchase orders. Okay, so I can either open it from accounts payable module, or else the purchase orders will also be available under procurement and sourcing module, right? Because purchase orders are something that the purchase team creates, and the invoice posting is normally done by the finance department, right? The accounts payable department. So that is the reason you might see that form in both the places. So for now, what we do is let us go to the accounts payable and open up our all purchase orders form. So you can also open it from procurement and sourcing as we discussed, and the options will not be changing unless you have the different security permissions. So currently we logged into the system as an admin user, right? So we will see everything, so we do not have any access restrictions. So being the buyer, I am seeing all the purchase orders that are already created in our legal entity, in our company, Countess Entertainment Systems, USA, right? If in case I have to create a new purchase order, then I will have to click on this new button to create this new purchase order, right? So let me click new, and I will have to choose the vendor account. So this is the company or the person from whom we want to purchase the goods, right? Goods, material, or items. So you might see people using different terminology to represent the same thing. Okay, I selected this vendor, and you also hear people calling them as supplier. So say okay. And so the purchase order basically has two sections, the header section and the line section. Okay, if you click on this header, you're going to see a lot of information. So let us not worry about it for now. You have these fast tabs. So you have plenty of information here. We will learn about them later, and especially the purchase order related information. It is mainly for the supply chain consultants and not for the finance consultants. So there is a thin line between supply chain and finance. So let us not worry about all these fields for now. Let's go to this lines section, and within this lines section, you have this purchase order lines grid. Okay, so in this grid, this is a place where you will add the item. As a buyer, I will add the item to my purchase order, meaning that this is the item that I want to purchase from my vendor. Okay, I click on this lookup and select this item. So in this case, I want to purchase the Surface Pro item. So this is one of the items that we as a company, we purchase and store in our inventory and then sell it to the customers. Okay, so I want to place an order for the Surface Pro because we are already out of stock for this item. Then you have to select the site and warehouse. So typically site and warehouse represents your inventory storage dimensions. So where exactly this item needs to be delivered and where this is supposed to be stored. Okay, so being finance consultants, you do not need to know this one at this moment. So select the warehouse, and I'm doing a tab on my laptop. So enter the quantity that we want to purchase from the vendor. Okay, so I need 100 quantity, and what is the unit? So I need the each pieces, right? And the unit price will be defaulted. So how does that unit price come and everything? That is a different story. So that comes into the supply chain topics. So ignore it for now. I created this purchase order now. Okay, if in case like Surface Pro, if I have to buy any other items, what I will do is I will add this line, click on this add line, and keep adding the other items that we need to purchase. Okay, that's fine. So we just purchase only this item for now and nothing else, right? So once after you create a purchase order, then you go to this purchase tab, and under purchase tab, you have this generate and confirmation. So typically in the business, what happens is that being a buyer of the organization, I will send a confirmation to the vendor saying that these are the items that we need, and this is the quantity that I need, and this is the price that we agreed. Okay, so generate confirmation, and so typically you select this print purchase order. Okay, when you say print purchase order, the purchase order document will be printed onto the screen so that you will be able to save that as a PDF and then send it to your supplier. Okay, so scroll it down and then click OK. Right, so you see the purchase order printed onto your screen, correct? So let us just review the information that is available in the purchase order. So you can see here, this is my purchase order number and on what date we are placing this purchase order, and what is the delivery address, so that vendor knows where exactly this item need to be delivered. And you can see the supplier information here. So if you scroll it down, so we have the information like what is the item number and what is the quantity that needs to be delivered by the supplier and the agreed price and everything. Okay, now this purchase order can be saved as a PDF, or else it can be directly printed to the printer and then sent it across to the supplier. Okay, so I'm not doing it right now, and I will go ahead and close this purchase order. Right, so we printed the purchase order confirmation, correct? And after, let us say, a certain time or on a specific date, supplier will send us the material, right? So there will be different roles within the organization, right? So I, being the buyer, I created a purchase order because I acted like a buyer. And similarly, there will be a receiving clerk in the warehouse department where the receiving clerk will receive the item when the truck comes in from the supplier. So that could be a truck that comes in, or else a shipment is delivered to our company, our warehouse. So warehouse is nothing but a go down. So that is how you can think about it for now. Right, so let us assume a case where we receive the material from the supplier, right? Then as a receiving clerk, what our receiving clerk does is he goes to this receive tab and he clicks on this product receipt, okay? Because he will need to record the quantity that is received by the supplier, correct? So scroll it down, under lines, you will see the item that we placed an order for and the quantity that we placed an order for. Okay, so sometimes it's possible that we placed an order for 100 quantity and we receive only 50 from the supplier, right? So the remaining may be delivered by the supplier a little later, at a later point in time. Okay, so let us assume that in this case we received only 50 quantity. So I changed the quantity to 50 here, and I will go ahead with the product receipt. So in some companies, the product receipt will also be called as goods receipt note, okay, GRN. So that is like general ERP terminology. So goods receipt note or else product receipt. Okay, so these are the most commonly used words. So we are posting the product receipt by clicking on this. Okay, so you don't normally print the product receipt because you don't really send the product receipt to anyone, but some companies, they'll print the product receipt and they do the bookkeeping. Okay, so they'll just do the signature and then keep it for records. So for time being, let us not do anything. So if in case you get any requirements where the goods receipt note or product receipt need to be printed, so you will be printing this product receipt, right? So click OK, and yeah, so this is important here. So the number not specified, right? So typically what happens, you get a delivery slip from the supplier. Okay, so because they'll be delivering the goods to our warehouse, right? So that is the reason they'll be sending a delivery slip, and that will contain a number. Okay, delivery slip number or delivery note number or packing slip number. So these are the different names that you normally hear. So that is a number that we enter here, because this acts like a reference number between our organization and even the supplier. Okay, so if I have any problem with this particular item that we received, then I will tell him, dear Mr. Supplier, I got 50 quantity from you on so and so date with reference to this particular product receipt number or a packing slip number, and one of those items is damaged, right? So that is how you start the conversation using your product receipt reference number. Okay, again, so product receipt is not much into the finance, so just for the sake of understanding the procure to pay cycle, we are doing the product receipt. So my product receipt is posted, and we can now move forward to the invoicing. So just keep a note of a few things here. So every step that we are doing, the information will be tracked. So for example, we did a product receipt for this particular purchase order, right? So if you look at this receive tab under journals, I have this product receipt. So if you click this product receipt, that will show me the information that we entered, right? So this is the product receipt number that we entered to receive the material from the supplier, right? And this is the item that we received, and out of 100 ordered quantity, we received 50 of them, right? So all this information is maintained. So the tracking is available at every step of the order, right? Done. So let us keep moving with the invoice posting now. Now, we received the material from the supplier, right? And the warehouse clerk, or the receiving clerk, received the material, and he normally signs the document that comes from the vendor, so which is a delivery slip, right? So the receiving clerk signs the document, and somebody from the vendor organization, they'll carry it and give it to their finance team, right? So that is where we will receive an invoice from their finance department. Okay, so we receive an invoice from the supplier. So invoice is nothing but a bill for the items that we received, right? So when we get that invoice, being the accounts payable clerk, I can perform the invoice posting. So in the invoice tab, I have this generate invoice. Okay, if I click this invoice, then I will be able to post the invoice for this purchase order. So if you looked at this one, the pattern is simple. I mean, the pattern is same. So under purchase, to be able to confirm, you have the confirmation button, and under product receipt, you have the product receipt button, and now to be able to do the invoicing, I have the invoice button, right? So let us not too much dig into the different fields that are available for now, because we just started. Let us understand the cycle first. So again, just like your purchase order, even your invoice has the header and lines section. When you're posting your purchase invoice, you have a lot of information here. So let us stay in the lines section, and within the lines section, you see here, this is where we enter the invoice number. So being the accounts payable clerk, I received an invoice from the supplier, and that will have the invoice number, that will have the bill number, right? So that invoice number we enter here. So that again, this is a unique reference that we use for communication, right? So the invoice number that I received from them is something like this, okay? And what is the invoice date? So typically you don't need to mention it if in case you are receiving it on the same date as system date, okay? So that is fine. And sometimes what happens is that we might have received the invoice yesterday, but we are putting it into the system today, right? In such cases, you will change this invoice date and all that. And if you want to put some description for the invoice, you can enter the invoice description here. Okay, so let us not change anything for now. Let us keep it simple. And here, we are doing the invoicing for the quantity that we received, right? Obviously, we placed an order for 100, but only 50 is what we received, and 50 is what we got the invoice for from the supplier. So I'm going ahead to post this invoice. So go ahead and post this one. Right. So when I tried posting it, I'm seeing an error here saying that invoice matching validation has not been performed. Okay, this is again a interesting topic for financials. Within financials, we will cover the invoice matching validation as well, probably in the future courses, not in this course, but yeah, certainly we will cover this in the part 2 of this financials courses. All right, so what is this basically? So how do you get rid of this? So sometimes even when you're working on the real projects, you might get this error. So when you get this error, what you do is go ahead and say update match status. Okay, when you do that, you can see here this match status. I should have shown you before I triggered this one, which normally says that it is failed. And when you click on this update match status, then it gets to a status of passed. Okay, so why would it be in failed, and why would it get changed to passed? That is something that you will learn when we talk about the invoice validation process. Okay, so for now, let us go ahead and post this invoice. All right, you see here, you got a message. The vendor invoice posting process is complete for vendor 1001 with this particular invoice number, right? So with that, our invoice posting is completed. Okay, so again, if you look at the invoice tab, under journals, you're seeing this invoice, right? So when you click this one, you will see the posted invoice information here. For this particular purchase order, how many ever the invoices that we received, we will be able to see that invoices information here. I received just one invoice, and within that, I can see that there is only one item, and this is the quantity, and this is the price, this is the net amount, and everything. Okay, so after, let us say, after waiting for a couple of days, if we receive the remaining 50 quantity, and then you're going to do the same product receipt, and you're going to perform the invoice for the remaining 50 quantity, right? So then you're going to see another invoice here with the latest invoice number and what is the quantity and item number in this lines section. If you are from the accounting background, you must be looking for what happens to my accounting entries, right? So for this particular posted invoice, if you look at this voucher, that gives us the information like what are the entries that are created by the system. Okay, so let us just take a quick look at it. We are not going to discuss about them in detail for now, the postings, but based on the configuration, you will be seeing different postings in your voucher transactions. So typically, this is your vendor balance posting type, where your accounts payable gets credited and your inventory or cost of purchased materials will get debited. Okay, so forget about the remaining ones, and these are like the offsets for the product receipt. We will discuss about them when we discuss about the purchase order and invoice postings. All right, so with that, I will close this form, and that's all for this session. Yep, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In the previous video, you looked at how do you create purchase orders and how do you do the purchase invoices, right? For example, we placed an order to the supplier and we got an invoice from the supplier. So in that case, how do you do the invoices for a purchase order that is already confirmed? Right? So that is what we have looked at in the previous video, right? In this one, I would like to take you through a simple invoice journal creation, right? So I explained it in the previous video where there will be some non-purchase order related invoices in the organization, right? So if you are purchasing some services, right? So if you're getting some services from the vendors, then most likely you will not go in the route of creating a purchase order and doing a product receipt and all that, right? So that is where you use the invoice journals to do those transactions. So we will take a look at them now. Then we will review the vendor transactions, right? After the transaction is posted, how do you see them in the vendor transactions, right? So let me take you into the application, right? So I go to the modules, accounts payable, then you have this invoice journal, right? So you have this, click on this, then you will see the journals screen, right? So to be able to create a new journal, you will have to click on this new button, then select a journal name. So select this AP invoice even for your practice, right? So I will give you more details about what is this journal name and why do you have it in the system, right? So you will basically get some values defaulted, and that is something that you will learn in the later videos where we talk about the journal names, right? So for now, select a journal name and click on these lines. So this is where you will enter. So firstly, enter the transaction date here, right? And so leave this to a vendor. So this account type actually determines what should be the values that you should be seeing in this field, right? So this journal interface is common across all the modules, right? For example, if I go to the customer payment journal, I will see the same screen, right? But the only difference is that this account type is by default selected to this customer, okay? So leave this to vendor because we want to enter a vendor transaction now, right? So in the accounts here, if you click this drop down, then you will see all the vendors within the Contoso US company, right? So I'm looking at them and I want to look for my XYZ enterprises, right? So definitely this is going to be a difficult task for you to find that vendor, right? Wherever you see the lookups, right? When you click on this lookup or drop down, you will be able to filter even here, right? Here, XYZ. So begins with XYZ. So that is what I'm telling the system. And you can see there are two vendors begins with that particular keyword. So I want to take this, right? Because this is something that I created for some different practice purpose. And this is the one that we created, XYZ enterprises, correct? Now, so you can enter the invoice date here. This is something like, in some cases, what happens is the vendor generated the invoice on 3rd November, right? But by the time that it reached us, perhaps he sent it over a courier, right? So then it might have reached us on 6th of November, but I want to keep the invoice date as 3rd November because that is what is the invoice date is, right? But the transaction is being entered in the system on 6th of November, but we literally got the invoice dated on 3rd November. So that is what I'm entering in the invoice date. So in some cases, you don't need to enter anything. Then the transaction date will be considered as your invoice date. Okay. So what is the invoice number? So this is the number that I'm seeing in the document that vendor sent me. And what is this invoice for? So that is the description here. So perhaps we got a travel ticket from this travel agency, right? So you can enter some description here. And if it is a vendor invoice, you always do a credit, right? So that is the accounting thing, right? You credit the vendor and you debit your expense account, correct? So that is the reason we are doing a credit here. And what is your debit to be, right? So since we are saying it should be travel, let us take a travel expense account here, okay? Right, so before that, notice one thing here. In the offset account type, you have the same options like ledger, customer, vendor, and all that, right? Now that I want this to be going to a particular ledger account, this should be selected to the ledger, right? So in the offset account, you will see the list of ledger accounts. You will also call them as main accounts in finance and operations. So you will learn about these main accounts a little later, right? So I see the list of accounts here, right? Out of them, I want to look for the travel expense. So search for travel, and I see this, right? So select this travel expense. And forget about this business unit, department, and all these things. So these are basically called dimensions. We will talk about dimensions a little later, right? Done. So I created this transaction, and I will be able to go ahead and post this here, right? Until we don't post this transaction, this is just a draft, right? So anybody come and do some changes to this one. But once we post this particular transaction, so that is when this is considered as an invoice that is already posted, right? So before I go ahead and post this one, I want to take you to the vendors form, right? I go to all vendors and I have this vendor here, right? So I told you that each of these buttons will open up and show up a particular information, right? For now, I want to take this vendor and click on this transaction here. So when I click on this particular transactions, I will see nothing here, right? Because that is a new vendor that we created and we did not do any transactions, right? And I also told you that the transaction, this particular transaction that we entered here, it is just a draft, right? So we will have to post this transaction, and that is when this transaction will be appearing in your vendor transactions, okay? All right, so you can see this journal is now posted. So you see here, this is called informational messages, info messages. That is how usually you hear people calling them. It says operation completed, right? Just click here, then you will see number of vouchers posted to the journal is 1, right? So this is done, right? Now what you do is go back to your vendor transactions and you can just try refreshing this, right? Because the form is already opened. So I'm trying to refresh it. So do you see here? I am seeing the transaction that we created, right? So what is it saying? So a credit to the vendor, that is $1,000, right? So let me show you something first. I close this, and this particular vendor, if you click on this balance, that shows you like what is the balance that is due to this vendor, right? So that is $1,000. The negative sign represents we as an organization, we will have to pay this vendor right now, correct? Close this and go back to your transactions. So it has the details like on what date the transaction is posted and what is the invoice number and every detail, right? So amount in transaction currency. So in which currency that we transacted, and this one refers to your amount in accounting currency. So what is the accounting currency and what is the transaction currency? I will talk about them a little later. Okay, and look at this balance field here. So this tells you that what is the balance that is still to be paid from this invoice, right? So currently it is showing $1,000 because yes, this is an invoice that we received just now, and we will have to still pay the whole amount, right? So sometimes what happens is we received an invoice for $1,000, and perhaps after a week we made a partial payment, right? We paid like $500 out of that $1,000 invoice, right? Then this balance will show you that remaining $500 is to be paid, right? So remember this balance field, right? This tells you what is the balance amount out of this invoice, right? Now, so with this, we are done with the invoice journal creation, correct? I want to take you to one more thing right now. I will go to accounts payable, and in that, I can use this vendor payment journal, right? So as I said, we use journals to post transactions in the system, right? So I go to the vendor payment journal and you see the same interface, right? So you have the new button here and you can select the journal name, and once after you create a new record, you will be able to click on these lines, right? So you see here, you have the same interface, right? So we will talk about how do you do the vendor payment journals, but the point that I would like to make here is the journal interfaces are same across the application, right? So like vendor payment journal, you also have your customer payment journal, right? When you receive a payment from your customer, then you go to accounts receivable, then you go to this payments and customer payment journal. Okay, so again, you see the same interface here. You select the journal name and get into the lines. Then here, you will see the same interface to enter your customer payment as well, right? So like this, you will use the journals to enter the transactions. And the interface is almost same across all modules, right? So with this, we are done with this particular video, and thank you so much for watching. Hello, everyone. In this session, let us take a look at how do you get a D365 F&O trial environment. If you ever tried looking at how do you get D365 F&O free trial, most likely you might have landed onto this page on Started Dynamics 365 free trial. So if you take a look at the applications that are available, so you got D365 sales, field service, and all of them, and you got an option to try them for free. However, if you try reaching down to the supply chain management or finance application, D365 Finance or Supply Chain Management, you don't have an option to try them for free. So it just gives you an option to request a demo. This is most likely because Microsoft wanted only the big organizations to try them and not every individual. So today, we are going to see how do you get this access. So I'm assuming you're a small organization who wants to get a trial access. So we'll get started with that note. So the prerequisite is you must have the access to the D365 Admin Center. Sorry, O365 Admin Center, Office 365 Admin Center. You must have the access to it. If in case you don't have a Office 365 Admin Center access, as a business, you will be able to try the Office 365 business account for free for the first 1 month. So let us take a look at this. How do you try that? So you search for O365 business standard, something like this. So then it will take you to the Microsoft official site. That will help you create a new O365 business account. So the one that you have here is Microsoft 365 Business Basic License, which you can try free for the first 1 month. So provide your email ID and get started with it. So it would ask you for some basic information, your first name, last name, and what is your company name, company size, and other details. At one point in time, it would also ask you for the tax identification number. You would also have to fill that in, and your credit card information as well, because once the free month trial is done, Microsoft will charge you for the business basic plan that you are purchasing. So basically, you might want to try that free for the first 1 month, and later you might want to take off that subscription. Okay. All right. So you finish this setting up your business account. You're gonna get an account something like your email ID .onmicrosoft.com account. So that is your business account. So only once you have the access to your Office 365 Admin Center using that on Microsoft.com account, you will be able to request for the free trial for Dynamics 365. Okay. So finish this up, and once after you finish this, then what you need to do is, I'm taking into another browser. Open Google search page and say Office 365 Admin Center. So you try logging into your Admin Center now using the credentials or using the account that you just created. So right now I already logged in. That's why I see that directly landing me to the Admin Center here. It would ask you for the new ID that is created that will end something like .onmicrosoft.com. You provide that user account and the password and get into the Admin Center. Okay. Once you come into the Admin Center, this is how it would look like. You get into the billing section, and then you see your products here. Yeah, this is where you see your Microsoft 365 Business Basic Trial that you have just subscribed for. Okay. So in addition to this, now what you would need to get is you need to go to the marketplace and then subscribe for the Dynamics 365 trial. So come into this all products, and here view by the category. You just say here Dynamics 365. Then you're going to see only the applications related to Dynamics 365. Scroll it down. So somewhere down you'll find your Dynamics 365 trial. So see all Dynamics 365 products, and then come down. Right. So you see this Dynamics 365 supply chain management trial. You can take either this, or else you can take the one that says Dynamics 365 finance trial. Okay, you have this one. So one of them you can take, and then say go to details, and then start the free trial. So when you start the free trial, this product will now get added to your licenses, because only when you have the license, then you'll be able to deploy this using the Power Platform Admin Center. Okay, so while this is getting processed, let us go into another page and say Power Platform Admin Center. Okay, so after you create your account and get into even this Power Platform Admin Center, then get into these environments. It may be possible that initially when you created your account and then come into this environment, it might show you some error or something. Then I would recommend you just leave it like a few hours for Microsoft to set up the environment and then have this ready for you. So if you see any error once you come into this environments page, don't worry about it. Just leave it like that for a few hours. After you come into here, this is where you have to deploy your new environment now. Okay. So here in the other page, we tried subscribing to the Dynamics 365 trial, right? I'm just doing a continue there so that it gets completed. Yeah, this is done now. I go into the billing and your products. So here I should be able to see both the products now. One is Dynamics 365 Finance Trial, and the other one is Business Basic Trial. Yeah, this one is important. You have to have this to be able to build your new environment. Now get into the environment section and try creating a new environment. So let's call this as D365 FO environment. And here choose the group none and leave the region to India. And what we just need now is the type is trial subscription based. This is how you have to choose this. I don't want to explain, about this and the other sandbox environment because it's going to be complicating right now. Just go ahead and say next. So leave the language, leave the currency, and the security group, leave it to none, set it to none, so that it is accessible for everyone. Now enable Dynamics 365 apps. So do you want to enable the Dynamics 365 apps for this environment? Say yes, and automatically deploy these apps. So you see here, you got your finance preview here. Only after you subscribe for your Dynamics 365 free trial, only then you'll be able to see this option. Otherwise, you don't see that. Okay. So even after you subscribed for your Dynamics 365 finance trial and you don't see this here, don't get panic. Leave that for again a couple of hours because I have a little doubt about the sync process. So save this. So once you do this, you see this new environment is preparing. So it can be used once ready. So you can see the status as preparing. So give it a few hours. At least it will take about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Once the time is done, you will be able to access this environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause this video and come back and do the video again after this state is ready. All right, I gave a few hours and came back into this environment, and I can see my new environment available here. So I actually faced a weird problem. When I came back into this environment section, I could not see my environment that was deployed last time. I don't know what went wrong, but what I did is I have just done the process once again. I created a new environment and did not actually change anything in the steps that need to be followed. So I believe, you don't run into this problem, but if at all you don't see the environment showing up here, I just recommend you to create a new environment and ensure that that comes into the state of ready. Okay. So once you see the state is ready, what you do is get into this environment details, and down here in the finance and operations URL, you're going to see your D365 F&O URL. So click this. That will take you to your D365 F&O environment. So log in with your credentials, the same account that you have used. So it is loading now. So you can see the environment deployed now along with your USMF data. Okay, so you can access it using the company's dropdown. Choose your USMF company, that is your preferred legal entity that many people would love to work with. That's it. So with this, you now learned how do you get a new environment for your D365 F&O trial. All right. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Right. Welcome back. In the previous videos, you learned about how do you create vendors, and you learned sorting, filtering techniques, and you understood procure to pay cycle and all these, right? So my intention is that I want you to understand how the business works, right? And at the same time, get a little familiarity with the finance and operations system, right? So if in case you are a consultant, worked on other ERP systems or other business applications, you know the basic things now, and you understood how do you do different things in finance and operations, right? And you also got familiar with the interface, right? So now this is the time that we start to build everything from scratch. So let us assume that we're gonna use Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations for a new company, a brand new company which is established, and we want to implement it for this new company, right? And that is what we are going to start from now, right? So in this video, what you will learn is you will learn how do you create the new legal entity, right? The new company, how do you create it in finance and operations? Then you will understand what is the localization and what are localized features basically, right? So before we move forward with the legal entity creation, I want to give you the case study that we are working with. So you had a look at this one before, right? Currently, we are working in the demo environment where you have the Contoso companies. One is for United States, one is for India, Malaysia, Japan, and Russia as well, right? So what if this Contoso is opening up a new office in Singapore, right? So that is what is the case study that we are taking up now, right? So as consultants, we are responsible to gather the requirements for Contoso Entertainment Systems Singapore, and we will have to build a new legal entity for them, right, from scratch. So this is what we'll be doing now. So with this, let us see how do we create a new legal entity that is for Contoso Entertainment Systems Singapore, right? And I'm giving a 4-letter code for this company, that is SGPC, right? So going forward, what you will do is that everything that you will learn, you will firstly learn it in the Contoso United States company, that is USMF, and you will configure that even in SGPC company. So with that, you're building the SGPC company from the base, right? So let us get into the system now. All right, so if it is a fresh implementation, you are going to start with an empty application, right? So when I say empty, you're gonna see only that company, right? Currently you're seeing DAT company here, right? So this is the only one that you will see, right? You will not see anything here. You will not see any legal entity, right? So currently you are seeing all the demo data companies, but in the fresh implementation, you will see nothing, right? Then how do you start creating it? Right? For example, you cannot go and create your vendors and everything in the DAT company. So you will have to start creating your new legal entity. So for that, what you do is go to this modules and organization administration, then open up this legal entities. So you see here legal entities, right? Let's open it up. Once you open up the legal entities form, this is how you see that. So you will see all the legal entities that are available in the demo data, right? So what you do now is we will have to create our new legal entity, right? So click on this new button, just like in any other form in finance and operations. So give your company a name, right? So we call that as Contoso Entertainment Systems Singapore. Okay, and what is that 4-letter code that we wanted to use? SGPC. So that this is what you will select in the legal entity dropdown. Okay, so here you choose the country region for your legal entity. So based on your implementation, if you're implementing it to a customer who is in Singapore, you're gonna take this as obviously Singapore, right? So I take this as Singapore and say okay. So I have got my new company SGPC created, right? So you're seeing this one here, right? Contoso Entertainment Systems Singapore. Now, so when you create a new company, there is certain information that you will have to enter here, right? So the first thing is, yeah, select the address information here. By default, your company name will show up here, and in the address field, it just shows the country or region ID, right? So here you edit this one and enter the address of this particular company, right? Enter the street information, city, state, and all the details, right? So just like how you entered the vendor address information, you will be entering the company address information, our legal entity address information, right? So the address information entering is going to be same across all the places, like vendors, customers, legal entity, and whichever the form that you take, the address entry is going to be the same, okay? So you enter the street information and everything and say okay. Then you have your contact information. The contact information of the legal entity can be entered here. And please remember one thing here. The address information that you enter here will show up in some of the reports that you will send to your customers or some external parties, right? For example, you send a sales invoice, right? So there, the company address information will show up to your customer, right? So you'll have some registration number details here. So based on the legal entity that you are selecting, based on the country that you selected, some of these fields will get enabled, right? So scroll it down and you can enter some bank account information. So I don't want to talk about all these right away. I want to talk about only the fields that you will be mandatorily touching when you start your implementation, right? So you look at this dashboard image. So what I do is I go to other tab and go to the home page, and you see here, this is the dashboard image. So whatever the dashboard image that you put here with appropriate image dimensions, that will show up on your dashboard, right? And scroll it down, and you can put some report logo. So whatever the logo that you put here, that will show up in your external reports. So especially the external reports are like customer invoice and, for example, customer account statement, something like that, right? So you add the logo of your client, so that shows up nicely on some of the reports, right? So that is about some of the fields that you should be knowing here. And you set up the language, then you also set up the time zone. So time zone is important because based on the time zone that you select here, all the records that are created, the created date time or modified date time kind of information will be captured based on the time zone you enter here, right? Now, I want to talk about the localized functionality. So you see here, this is one important parameter here where what should be the localized functionality to be used for this particular company. Then the question is, what is this localization, right? So just think about it. So Microsoft has come up with this product, Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, right? So they hugely invested onto this product. And this can be used by almost every business across the globe, right? Then when it is being used by India, so there may be certain functionalities that we need in India, right? So similarly, if it is being used in United States, there may be certain functionalities that are applicable only for United States and not for the rest of the world, right? So in such cases, so how does the same product can be sold across all the places, all the countries in the world, right? So that is the reason Microsoft has come up with some localized functionality. So which means if it is being implemented to Indian company, you can get some localized functionalities that are specific only for India. And if it is being used or implemented for a particular company in United States, certain localized functionalities for United States can be enabled, right? So how can you enable it? So that's the question now. So you can enable it using this parameter, right? So localized functionality region. So in almost every case, you will leave this parameter to this detect using company address, right? So when you say detect using company address, then automatically based on the country or region that you selected for this legal entity, the localized functionalities of that particular country will be enabled, right? So when we are creating this legal entity, we said that SGP, right? Singapore. So if there are any localized functionalities or features that are available, then automatically system can enable them for this particular company, right? Now, to talk about localized functionalities a little bit more, I just want to give you a little more clarity there, right? So in United States, we need certain functionality called tax 1099, right? And within India, we need some functionalities around tax. So those are specific to GST, right? So if you go to USMF company, which is for Contoso Entertainment Systems, United States, right? If you look at the all vendors form, you see here, I already went to accounts payable and all vendors and opened this form. You scroll it down and you see here, you have a particular tab called tax 1099, correct? Within the same vendors form, you have this tax 1099. And you have some information that you can capture that is related to tax 1099. However, I want to go to a different legal entity, which is my Indian legal entity. Let me switch to INMF here. And I open this vendor and scroll it down. You see here, you are not seeing that tax 1099, correct? You go back to your US legal entity, you are seeing this tax 1099. However, you are not seeing it here, right? You have another tab here which is called tax information. This is specific to India. Okay, so that is how the localized features can be enabled, correct? You go back to the legal entities, and as I said, the majority of the implementations, you will leave this to detect using company address. And very rarely what happens is that when you are implementing it to a particular company that is in, let's say, out of United States, for example, you are implementing it to Mexico, right? Even if you're implementing it to Mexico, you might want to tell the system that I want to use the functionalities that are available for United States. So then I can take this United States, then what happens is system will get me the localized functionalities of United States. So this happens in some of the implementations where United States and Mexico being, two neighboring countries. That happens sometimes that, the Mexican company thinks that some of the functionalities that are available in the United States localization, we want to use them, right? In such cases, you will set this parameter to United States, right? But as I said, in majority of the implementations, you leave it to detect using company address, right? Fine. Now, I will close this because this is good enough for us to get started with our newly created legal entity. Now, so already you have your SGPC company available here, right? So try to search for your SGPC company, and I'm sure that you will find it there. So if you're not finding, there must be some reason, right? So that must be, it was just trying to refresh it, and you can see this now anyway, right? So click on this SGPC company, and this is your new legal entity. So you created a new legal entity now that says Contoso Entertainment Systems Singapore, right? Now, let us go and start creating the vendors now. I go to accounts payable, all vendors, right? I'm sure that when you create a new legal entity, you're excited to go and do everything now, right? Whatever that you learned so far. Let us see if we can move forward with this. I go and try to create a new vendor, okay? So you started creating a new vendor, right? And you have some of the information that is mandatory. So if you take a look at this one here, the group, and I am sure that you'll get stuck here, right? Because you will have to create the groups before you create the vendors. So like that, there will be a lot of dependent data. So that is the reason you will have to start knowing what is that you will have to create first. Before you move forward with the other configuration, what is that base configuration that you will have to create, correct? So that is where we move forward into the next lecture. A quick recap on what we learned. You learned creation of new legal entity, and you now understand what is localization and what are the localized features and how do you enable them by setting up the parameter on the legal entity, right? So with that, we are done with this particular video, and thank you so much. Welcome back. In this video, you will learn about the basic information that you will need to set up for your newly created company. Okay, so some of the information is fiscal calendars, accounting currency and the reporting currency, and chart of accounts. Okay, in the next videos, you will see them in detail about how do you configure them within the finance and operations application. But in this video, we will just discuss about these different terms and what is the purpose of these different configurations. All right, so let's keep moving. So the first question is, what is a calendar year and what is a fiscal year, right? So I'm sure that you know what is a calendar year. So a calendar year typically represents Jan to December period, correct? And the fiscal year, it is not common across all the countries, right? So it varies from country to country. If you take India, we follow April to March as our fiscal year because that is the accounting year that many companies follow within India. And if you take Australia, they are from July to June. Similarly, if you take United States, the majority of the corporates will follow Jan to December as their fiscal year. Okay, so let us take a quick look at the different fiscal years of different countries. So I will take you to the wiki page. All right. So if you search for the fiscal year in the wiki page, this is the information that you will see there. And you take a look at this one here. Australia, you have it for July to June. And if you scroll this down, you see the different fiscal years for different countries. Correct? So for India, you see here, this is April to March. And you take a look at the United States. So you see the corporates, Jan to December is the fiscal year for many of the corporates. However, the most of the states and the federal government will follow different fiscal year. Okay, so where you can see July to June and October to September, right? So what we understand from this is the different countries will follow different fiscal years, correct? At the same time, it is not mandatory that a company that is established in that particular country should follow the official fiscal year of the country, right? So for example, in India, while majority of the implementations follow April to March as the calendar, some of the implementations, some of the companies which have the head offices in United States, they will follow Jan to December as their fiscal year. Okay, so with this, what we understand is the fiscal year is an accounting year which is different for different implementations and different companies, right? So during your implementation, you will know from your customer or client that what is the fiscal year that they would like to follow. Okay, so based on their fiscal year, you will have to set up the fiscal year in the finance and operations system. Okay, so that is where you will configure the fiscal calendars within finance and operations. When it comes to certification, there could be a possible question about where these fiscal calendars are used in finance and operations, right? So if you see certain questions, then you have to remember that fiscal calendars are basically used for 3 different reasons. One is for financial transactions, then fixed asset depreciations, and budget cycles. Okay, so we talked about these financial transactions, right? Because the transaction that you are posting will be posted into that particular fiscal year. So to make your reporting easier, when you're pulling the reports like for the last fiscal year, then the system gets you the data that is posted in that particular fiscal year. Okay, so that is where your fiscal year or fiscal calendar is used, correct? So that is where we say financial transactions. And when it comes to fixed asset depreciations, so those of you who do not know about fixed assets, do not worry about it for now. We will learn about them later. But those of you who have the basic idea about the fixed assets, so we have the fixed asset acquisition and fixed asset depreciation, right? So you acquire the fixed asset to the company and you will run the depreciation. You will be posting the depreciation for different years, correct? So this fixed asset depreciation posting, we use the fiscal calendars even there. Okay, so to define like for the last period of 3 months, how much is the depreciation that should be calculated. So the fixed asset depreciation will follow the fiscal calendars that we define in the system. Okay, and similarly, budget cycles will also use the fiscal calendars, where we define like the budget that we are defining in the company is for the period of Jan to December 2020. Right, so to be able to define that, you use the fiscal calendars. Okay, so that is where you will have to remember that in the budget cycles, you will use the fiscal calendars and even the fixed asset depreciation and the financial transactions. Okay, so this is one of the certification questions, and that is the reason we are talking about it. But we will talk about this fixed asset depreciation and budget cycles in detail later in the next parts. Okay, the next topic is accounting currency and reporting currency. Okay, so when you are implementing finance and operations system for a specific client, you will have to set up what is the accounting currency that should be followed for that particular company. Okay, so typically the accounting currency will be the currency of that particular country. For example, if we are implementing it to a client who is based in India and this legal entity is for Indian operations, then we will set up the accounting currency as INR, Indian rupees, right? And at the same time, if we are implementing it to another subsidiary of the same client and that is within United States, then your accounting currency will be US dollars. Okay, then what is the reporting currency? Okay, so to talk about the reporting currency, let me just take the help of a notepad. Let's take an example of our newly created company, that is Contoso Entertainments Singapore. Okay, so based on the logic that we talked about, the accounting currency of this particular company is going to be Singapore dollar, right? SGD. And what is going to be the reporting currency? So how do you define it usually? So just think about this one here. The Contoso Entertainment Singapore has its head office in the United States, okay, and the management sits in the United States. So whatever the revenue reports, balance sheets that we generate out of the system, it is like most likely the management would like to see the figures, the values in the in the US dollars, correct? So that is the reason you can define your reporting currency as US dollars. Okay, so when you define a reporting currency, just remember one thing here. It is not that the reports will be generated only in the US dollars. Okay, so the reports will be generated in both the currencies. So whatever the values that will be coming up in the reports, so you will see them in both accounting currency and reporting currencies. That is, the values will be represented in Singapore dollars and also US dollars. Okay, so by defining the reporting currency, what happens in the system is, so every transaction that you are booking, like if you are booking 1,000 Singapore dollar transaction, so that conversion value in US dollars will be always maintained. So for example, your 1,000 Singapore dollars is equivalent of 800 USD. I'm just taking a rough figure, right? So this will be maintained in the system for each and every transaction that you're posting. Okay, so that is about accounting currency and reporting currency. And you will also have to define chart of accounts. Okay, so you know chart of accounts, right? You will have your travel expense account and you have your accounts payable, accounts receivable, all your accounts that you need to manage the business. So you will have to define those accounts in the system, because different implementations, different clients will have different chart of accounts, right? So if you take one implementation, we will use like some 200 accounts, and if you take another implementation, they will have a different set of accounts, which is like around 250 accounts, right? So that is the reason you can define your own set of accounts in the system. Okay, so you will have to create the chart of accounts, and that is how the system knows that what are the accounts that we have to use in the particular company that we are implementing. So these different things that we discussed about, all this configuration will be done in a particular form called ledger. Okay, so within the general ledger module, you have a form that is called ledger form, and that is the heart of the finance module and the entire application where firstly you will define this configuration in the system before you move forward with any other configuration. Okay, otherwise you keep getting some errors like you did not define your accounting currency, you did not define your chart of accounts and all that. Okay, so that is the reason you will start with this configuration and then you move forward to the next ones. Right, so I will see you in the next video where we talk about how do you configure them, and we will also discuss in detail about these things. Right, so thank you so much for watching. Hello everyone. In this video, we are looking at the ledger form in general ledger. We will also learn creation of fiscal calendars and understand the accounting currency, reporting currency, and transaction currency in the application. All right, let's get into the application now. So to be able to go into the ledger form, you will have to go to the modules, under which go to the general ledger module. Under general ledger, you have this ledger form. So open this up under ledger setup. So before we configure this for our newly created company, that is SGPC, let's take a look at the ledger configuration in the USMF company in the demo data. So here you have certain fields like chart of accounts, fiscal calendar, accounting structure, and the currency setup, all these. So obviously every piece of information is mandatory here. What we do is, at first, let's pay some attention towards some other important fields like fiscal calendar and the currencies. And later we'll take a look at the chart of accounts. Okay, so if you take a look at the USMF company, you have the fiscal calendar set to a value called fiscal. So let's just open up this calendar. So fiscal calendar configuration is used to define what is the fiscal calendar of the company, or what is the fiscal year of the company. So if you take a look at this one now, what is the setup for this fiscal calendar? So for the calendar fiscal, and I'm looking at the year 2020 here, my period is basically starting at Jan 2020 and ending at 31st December 2020. So this is my calendar configuration for my USMF company. So similarly, we will have to create a calendar for our newly created company, SGPC, and then we have to tag it to the ledger form. All right, so let's get into that now. So to be able to create the fiscal calendars, I will be able to go to fiscal calendars through the general ledger. Under that, I have the same ledger setup, and I have this fiscal calendars. Okay, so let's open this fiscal calendars, and you see here, I already have some data in this particular form. So this is where I wanted to remind you, like, if you remember this, initially I was telling you that the data is maintained per each company in D365 Finance and Operations, right? But if you take a look at this SGPC now, before we created any data, I already see some other calendars here, right? Because this calendars form is actually a shared form, meaning that the data that you create in USMF company in the fiscal calendars form will also be shown up when you open the particular form in the SGPC company. So whatever the records that you create here, the records will be shown up from all the legal entities because this is a shared form. So this form is called a shared form. So like this, there are certain forms where the data is shared across the legal entities. And why is it done like this? Let me just take an example here. So I have this USMF company in the demo data, and also I have another company called USRT. So this is called Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, and this is like Contoso Retail, and this is also established in US. Okay, so both being the US legal entities, these two legal entities want to follow the same fiscal calendar, which is like January to December, January 1st to December 31st. So in such cases, instead of you creating the data in two different legal entities separately, why can't we create the configuration as a shared configuration, and then we use the same calendar in both the companies? So that is the idea behind configuring this as a shared form, or creating this as a shared form by Microsoft, right? So let me take even another example here. Just think about this now. So we have this Contoso Singapore. Now let us assume that Contoso also wants to open another legal entity in Singapore, calling Contoso Retail or Contoso Electronics Singapore, something like this. So they both are two different entities, but if you look at the operations, obviously they both will follow the same fiscal calendar. So the calendar is like April to March, right? So that is 1st of April to 31st of March. So in that case, what we do is that we just create one single calendar, and then we're going to tag the same calendar in both the companies' ledger forms. Okay. So that is the reason the data in the fiscal calendars form is shared. And if you are implementing it to any business where they have like 10 legal entities or 10 subsidiaries, then still you might create a single fiscal calendar. where all of these legal entities are available in one single country and they follow the same fiscal calendar. In such case, you will create only one single fiscal calendar and you use that calendar across all the companies. Let us see how do we create a new calendar now. I click on this new calendar and I will give it a name like SG calendar, or else I can just name it like April to March, and I can also name it as SG to notify that this is created for Singapore. And I can put the description here like April to March, something like 1st April to 31st March. Okay, and here I can specify the start of the fiscal year as April 31st, sorry, 1st of April to March 30th, so 31st March 2021. Okay, and you can name this fiscal calendar year as 2020 and 21 so that anybody can easily understand this, right? And the length of the period that we want. So the length of period basically is like each period should be of what length. So typically we create them as 1 month length because that is how it is easy for you to manage the operations. So for example, after the month is closed, you might want to set this period as on hold, and then you'll be able to reopen it if at all it is required. So we don't need to talk about this setting up the period as on hold and all this right now, but typically please remember that you will be setting this up to 1 month as a period length, sorry. So I say create, and you can see here a new calendar is created, and in this particular calendar you have my periods here starting from 1st of April to 31st March 2021. Okay, and the first period typically system creates that as the opening period, which will usually be like 1st of April, and even the end date is also 1st of April since there is an opening period. And this will be created for the system purposes, and we don't need to worry about it for now. Under this operating, you see here, you have the start date as 1st of April and end date as 30th of April. So like this, you have 12 different periods. Okay, so we created this calendar and a calendar year. Okay, so this one is a calendar year, and this is our calendar. And if in case I want to create a new year in the same calendar, I'll have to stay in the same calendar and then click on this new year. When I click new year, then system can automatically take the periods from my previous calendar year, like this, copy from last fiscal year. This is set to S, right? And with this configuration, automatically system can detect like what was my start of the fiscal year in the previous year, and then it can get me the same date here. Okay, so typically you will just leave this like copy from the last fiscal year, and then you will create. Okay, so when I create a new fiscal year, you see here, this is my new fiscal year. I'm sorry, I should have named it as fiscal year 2021 and 22, and this is just the name, right? So that is fine. I want to show you the fiscal calendars from the USMF company now to understand that shared form concept clearly. So I go to the general ledger, and under ledger setup, you see here, I'm opening the fiscal calendars here under USMF company, and you see here, still my newly created calendar is available here. Right? So making it available to be assigned in any company, this calendar is available here, right? The newly created calendar. So that is why I call this as a shared form. So like this, there are many places, there are many forms where the data is shared across the legal entities, right? So now what I do is, I go to this SGPC company, and then I go to the ledger form, open up the ledger form, and go to the click edit, and then click on the fiscal calendar, choose this newly created calendar. Okay, as I was saying, let's leave this chart of accounts for now. I'm just filling a value which you don't need to be worried about for now. So I have set up my fiscal calendar here. All right, now let's talk quickly about the accounting currency. So being the Singapore company, obviously I would want the accounting to happen in the Singapore dollar currency, right? So I can choose the SGD as my currency here, and in my reporting currency, I want to keep this as USD for now. In the next video, we will learn in detail about the accounting currency, reporting currency, and transaction currency. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. In this video, we will understand about the accounting currency, reporting currency, and transaction currency in detail. Let me take you through the Excel to be able to explain the difference between these three currencies. So I have the currency as Singapore dollar, and the reporting currency is US dollar. All right, let's firstly close these two things. So accounting currencies, obviously, as we talked about, in which currency we want the accounting to happen. That is where we mentioned it to be SGD. And what about the reporting currency? So reporting currency is basically an alternative currency in which your transaction values will be shown up in all the forms. For example, if you have posted a transaction, a vendor invoice, as we were looking at in the previous videos, I'm posting a vendor invoice of, let's say, 1,000 Singapore dollar, then the same 1,000 Singapore dollar will also be shown in the reporting currency, which is US dollar. So every transaction that we create, we will be in a position to see the transaction in the US dollar currency because my reporting currency is set to US dollar. So not only this, there are quite a lot of reports that we have, which will show you the trial balance and like dimension statement reports and profit and loss statements. So you have different statements or reports that you'll normally print from the system. And in all the reports, you will be able to see the data in the reporting currency as well. So all the data will be shown in accounting currency and also in the reporting currency, making it easier for stakeholders. And probably if you're sharing these reports with your US subsidiary or US parent company, then you will be able to share the reports and they will be able to look at the figures in the US dollars. So that is the purpose of reporting currency. And finally, I was talking about what is transaction currency, right? So while my accounting currency is Singapore dollars, there is a possibility that I will also be doing some transactions in a non-accounting currency. For example, I will receive an invoice from a vendor who is in India. He will send me the invoice in the INR currency. So I can call this as my transaction currency, and this 1,000 INR will be accounted in the Singapore dollar, and also alternatively will be showing me this particular currency value in the US dollar as well, because this is my reporting currency. Okay, so to quickly show you one example, what I will do is we have already set up this company now with the accounting currency and reporting currency, and this is done. Let's save this and close this, and we are done with this. So I will quickly take you to one of the vendors that we created before. So what is that vendor that we created? Accounts payable, all vendors. And let me search for the XYZ company. Okay, so this is my XYZ Enterprises with which we booked some other invoices, right? If you click on these transactions, you will see the list of transactions posted, right? So this is where you can take a look at this here. System will actually show me the amount in the transaction currency. So here the way that you'll have to read this is the transaction currency is US dollar and the amount is 1,000. So it is like 1,000 USD. And this amount field, you can read this field tip. You call this as a field tip. You click on when you just focus on the field, then you will see some information about the field that tells me like the transaction amount in the accounting currency. So if in case this transaction is made in a non-accounting currency, or you also call that as non-company currency, then you will see this value in an accounting currency. So in current case, our transaction currency and also the accounting currency both are same, right? So that is the reason you're seeing the same value here. But otherwise, the value will be converted into your accounting currency, and then you will see that value here. And similarly, you have this amount in reporting currency. You see here, this is the field. You will be able to expand it just like in your Excel. So if you look at this value here, this is the value of it in the reporting currency. All right, so that's all for this video, and thank you very much for watching. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are looking at how do we create general journals, and we look at the different ways that transactions can be entered in journals. Let's get started. In one of the previous videos, we looked at how do we create invoice journals, right? To record vendor invoices, we used invoice journals. So similarly, to record certain expenses within the organization, we use general journals. So let's take a quick example. If we incurred expenses, like for the cleaning purposes, this is how our accounting entry will be, isn't it? Cleaning expenses credit with $1,000. And if that is paid through the petty cash account, we debit the petty cash account with $1,000. So this is a typical expense entry that we normally book, right? And these account names will be given an account number in any ERP system. So likewise, even finance and operations, we call these as ledger accounts, and we have a number for these accounts, like this, right? Now let us get into the general journals and see how do we book this transaction. To be able to go to general journals, I will go to modules and general ledger, journal entries, general, click on the new button and take the journal name. As I was mentioning, we will talk about what are journal names later in this course. For time being, let's take this journal name and click on the lines. And if you remember, in the vendor invoice journals, we set this account type to be vendor, right? But now leave this account type to be ledger because we want to record an expense, right? And this is not related to either vendor or customer or anything. So it is between the ledger accounts. So select this as ledger and look at this lookup, and you have a lot of accounts, right? So instead of searching for it there, let's type petty cash because this is the account that I need. So I'm taking the petty cash account and forget about these dimensions for time being. and I'm putting some description here, cleaning expenses for the whole office, right? Right. So this is the account that we want to get credited. So that is the reason I'll put the credit value as $1,000. And by the way, since my accounting currency for USMF company is US dollars by default, the value that I'm entering here is in US dollars, right? So in the offset account, so this is where I can search for the cleaning expenses account. I click Alt down arrow to look at the accounts, and I have my account, cleaning expenses. So forget about these dimensions, we talk about them later, and save it. You see? So this is the currency that we talked about. So this is how you enter a quick general journal transaction. So if you look at this one, this is how you will have to read this. So from the left to right. So this petty cash account is getting credited while the offset account gets debited, right? This one. So this is how you enter a simple transaction. All right. Once after you enter this, just go ahead and post this one. So take a look at this debits and credit totals here. So the total journal debit amount is $1,000 and the credit is also $1,000. So the journal is balancing. So the journal must be a balanced journal, and only then you will be able to post this particular journal. Okay. Also remember that in finance and operations terminology, we can also call this as voucher. So I will call this as a voucher. I mean, this particular transaction can be called as voucher. Okay, I will go ahead and post this transaction. So while it is getting posted, let me duplicate this tab, and I will go ahead and create another journal. I will take the same journal name and click on the lines. So the same transaction, by the way, you can see that this journal got posted. Okay, so I will go to this other duplicated tab, and here, the same transaction, I can actually flip the account and offset account. So that is the other way of entering it, right? So instead of saying like petty cash account should be credited, you can always say that your cleaning expenses account can be selected here, and the debit can be entered here, and you can put the offset account as your petty cash account. So that is another way of entering the transaction. So more than that, I wanted to show you another different approach, because when you go to the customers, you might see them entering the transactions in different ways, right? Or else during your training, probably people will come up with a lot of different questions. Then to be able to answer them, you should be in a position to addressed. Is answer them. You should be in a position to know the different ways that you enter, so that some of the requirements can be addressed. So here, I'm going to select the same cleaning expenses account. So instead of taking the petty cash account, this time I'm taking the cleaning expenses account here, and the cleaning expense account should be debited, right? So I'm going to put 1,000, and I'm going to create a new line now. So I did not put the offset account here intentionally, because I'm showing you the other way of entering the same transaction. So here, I select the petty cash account here. I just typed petty, and I clicked on this lookup to take my petty cash account. And so my petty cash account should get credited, right? So I can enter this $1,000 here. That's it. So this is another way that you can enter the transaction. Okay. And one thing that I want you to notice here, you look at this voucher number. So this number is currently configured to be auto-generated. Based on the setup, a new number gets generated only when the voucher is balanced. So in this case, the two transactions, the two lines that I entered in the journal are now balanced. That is the reason when I click new, only then I will get a new voucher number. So a balanced transaction will get assigned with a voucher number. Let us assume that we incurred an expense of $500 towards cleaning expenses and another $500 for something else. So in such case, what I can do is I can set the debit as 500 here, and then I can create another line So here, for example, the other one is for travel expense. Then I'm taking a travel expense account here and then putting another $500. So this way, the credit is from one ledger account while the debit is to two different ledger accounts, right? So this is another way that you can enter the transactions. In our next video, we will look at how do we create these ledger accounts and also understand the difference between the main account and chart of accounts. Thank you very much for watching. Hello everyone. In this video, we will understand chart of accounts and main accounts. Then we will review the chart of accounts used for different legal entities. Then we will also create new chart of accounts for your newly created company, right? So in the previous lecture, we looked at how do we create journals, right? Then I was explaining you about the petty cash account and travel expense account. And we also talked about having an account number for all your accounts, right? So we called them as ledger accounts, right? In D365 finance and operations terminology, you can also call these as main accounts. So typically you will see people calling them as either main accounts or ledger accounts. So they both are one and same. All right. So these accounts are your main accounts, right? Then what about chart of accounts? So to be able to explain you the chart of accounts, I will have to take you through how the creation of main accounts process was designed earlier in the previous versions of AX, or D365 finance and operations. So let us take an example here. I have two legal entities in Contoso Demo Data. One is Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, which is called as USMF company. And I do have Contoso Systems Retail USA. This is called as USRP. So if you look at the chart of accounts, or if you look at the main accounts that are needed in this company, I need travel expense account, and I will need accounts payable, receivable accounts, the bank account, cleaning expenses account, and all these. And I need many more accounts in this company. And I do have this same requirement even in the other company, that is USRT company.